So, yo, what up? This is another installment of the Headspace Talking Conversations again. It's VJ.
Lotakeza.
We're back at it. Now, this is a very important episode because this is an episode where during the course of the Headspace and everything that we've been doing, we've been getting immensely rich feedback from all of our subscribers, and we appreciate that. And so So we decided to do a whole episode for y'all addressing yongi mibuzo, yongi queries, all of the engagements that you've been probing us on. Okay?
And logo, like we said, the Headspace I know here today. It's a dialogue. So in order to encourage our subscribers now, so that's why we thought the episode. Yeah, so what we're gonna address is mostly the questions. We're gonna do, let's say, two episodes.
Okay.
Yeah, on our episode, hip hop versus Kwaito.
Ooh.
Yes.
That was a solicitous one, you know. A lot of people came back to us on that one. I would think there was also a deliberate sense of making that the conversation, because we all know hip hop and Kwaito have a very solid history up in Mzansi, so obviously it would wrestle feathers, and indeed it did. What did the masses say?
Okay, so who I know. The guys I know, I've been waiting for somebody to break this down. I'm a is that Generation X or Z? Yeah,
aka 2000.
Oh, okay.
2000.
So I was exposed.
Shout out, I know.
So I was exposed and related more to hip hop than to Kwaito.
Right.
I watched a documentary on SABC1. I think it was called "I'm Still in Love with Kwaito."
I remember that.
Yeah, I think that Doc Shebeleza illustrated beautiful on most of what you guys are saying. Kwaito is authentic to us, and it's beautiful to see it evolve. I hear it whispers and piano. Kwaito was supposed to be to us what hip hop is to Afro-Americans.
Yeah.
It goes back to Pro being the perfect example, I think, of how Kwaito evolved to hip hop.
Yeah.
What would you say? How would you respond to that?
Definitely agree with that sentiment. Kwaito is to us what hip hop is for the African American experience, and I think just like hip hop has evolved, morphing into movements like, you know, trap, taking even before trap actually, the different kind of sounds that came out of hip hop, the hi-fi, the drill, the lo-fi rap, and even Kwaito morphing into this kind of Durban Kwaito sound, up until Sifikile to a point where we've got this new piano sound. These are all kind of distant relatives of the same family tree, this family tree of black expression. And I think whether we call it hip hop, whether we call it Kwaito, whether we call it piano, ultimately I think we should be able to look behind the aesthetic and the actual styles and see this is just black expression at its best in every kind of mode that it takes on, and that when we're able to look beyond the particular kind of styles, we can interestingly put these things together in ways that, you know, make something new.
And interestingly enough, last week we dropped an episode where we said Lumando was
is the GOAT.
Is the GOAT.
It's the greatest of all time.
Yeah. So we would like, guys, comment,
highlight us on that. The Headspace is legitimizing the fact that there were rappers in Kwaito.
Yeah.
And if rap is an element of hip hop, then we need to acknowledge the fact that there were people with the hip hop mindset within the Kwaito.
Wow. So Uramasa Majolwane.
Shout out Ramasa.
Even though I think he went off the tangent, he was like, Takeza, is being a sneakerhead one of the new elements in hip hop? If so, give us a crash course on sneakers and show us your drip too.
That was explicitly directed at you, Satula, and let the master speak.
No man. Being a sneakerhead, I don't think it is an element of hip hop, because sneakers were okay. Hip hop made sneakers more popular outside of because sneakers
Sports.
were outside the sport. So
Yeah.
so I wouldn't say it's a new element. But if Uramasa and anyone who wants us to actually have a series on sneakers, the impact is sneakers is to the hip hop culture, we can do that.
Talk to us. I mean, sneakers might not be an element of the
Yeah.
hip hop culture, as in they did not form part and parcel of how it was born, but they definitely became an aspect of how it's expressed.
Yes, yeah.
So definitely, you can't talk hip hop without talking sneaker culture. And I think if you all want to see some episodes on the importance, the role of sneakers in hip hop, particularly up in South Africa,
Yeah, but yeah, obviously South Africa.
we have a lot to say as well.
Yeah, we have a lot to say.
Kudala
Wow.
Saro Kamapata fresh is what it is. So talk to us.
Yeah, and Unadi Divine. Uti yo hiking ngoku umduno tabs, and I think it's about when you're saying, when you were talking about if you the thing about
Yes,
Kwaito
yes.
and-
I made the
and
comparison, and I deliberately made the controversial comparison of Mdu and Tabs to kind of also kick in that factor. Nate, hopefully we get it right.
Yeah, uti nizawuqala uchuku ke ngoku. I really enjoy this discussion too. I love the fact that you guys tackle topics people would rather leave untackled. Much love for you.
Shout out. Appreciate it. I love the feedback, because I will admit at times I do go for the jugular, because in order to make a point you need to touch people where they're sensitive, and I really think that the formula is working, because people are passionate about hip hop and their favorites.
Yeah. So that was on the hip hop versus Kwaito. Masingene apa. No, now on this one, this is the one we did about hip hop. So this is the one we did hip hop history, the origins.
Yeah. The origin story.
Yeah. What I like about on the comment section about this one is that we have a guy. His name is Fifth Element. Yeah. And I get the sense that he's from Cape Town, an older head. And what I wanted to emphasize about the headspace is that what we're doing is bridging the gap between the new school and the old school.
Right.
So where we can have a conversation without anyone disrespecting anyone. Yeah, so we have a common ground. So this is what we do. And I like the fact that he commented a lot and he had a lot to say.
Yeah.
So on the first one, he was like, around the 7 minutes, y'all are bringing some great insights.
I love this man. He even gets the time code.
Yeah, the time
of
code.
where exactly we said what.
Yeah.
Shout out to Fifth Element.
So he's saying, y'all are bringing some great insights for those who don't know that rappers used to be just hype men for DJs.
Yeah.
Interestingly, as a kid growing up in the very late 70s and in the early 80s in Cape Town, we would get cassettes recorded in local disco clubs. We were too young to go there ourselves, and the first time many of us heard someone rap, well before hearing actual rap songs, where when local disco club DJs would rap their own version of the flows and structures of American early rap songs.
Wow.
By the likes of Curtis Blow, Sugar Hill Gang, etc., as a way of introducing themselves to the crowds.
Yes, sir.
So by the time we would hear the originals, as a few months later, when it was inevitable, ended up either brought by someone as an import LP or Iskelem cassettes recording of the LP, we would have an aha moment. Yeah. So personally for me, I was around 83, 84 when I realized that hip hop in some sort of an amalgamation of different art forms, and that rap was just one of them. But it was in the tumultuous 85 that I first got to interact with people who were actual crews.
Yeah.
I was by then already of the mindset that I would like to be a DJ, but not in a hip hop sense of being a DJ, but more wanting to emulate disco club DJs. Today I still DJ and I play hip hop events, but I'm also still not a hip hop DJ in the sense of how a hip hop DJ is perceived to be.
Yeah.
Anyways, enough about me. Further below, a short comment about the rest of your take on the history.
No, shout out to Fifth Element. Like, such a rich personal story.
Yeah.
It's hip hop in South Africa has far-reaching roots. We're talking about the early 80s.
Yeah, that's the early 80s.
And here's a dude just going into the beautiful memories of what it was like to be young and to be black in South Africa at that time and discover this art form. Beautiful. Yeah.
Okay, so he went further.
Yeah, talk to us.
So he was like, okay, on the whole issue, I honestly had no intention of going to long arguments about semantics. And yes, objectively, when one only uses the rationale of archived history of hip-hop in the form of recorded rap songs, then of course the first recorded rap song is the first recorded rap song. Undisputably, fact, it is the first archive of an element of hip-hop in Mzansi though.
Okay.
Following your rationale, one could then on the same basis argue that hip-hop only really started in the Bronx after the first official recording of rap tracks in 1979 by the likes of Bill Curtis and the Fatback Bang, or by Sugar Hill Gang or Curtis Blow, first to be signed to a major label, who all recorded in 1979. Bill Curtis was arguably the first to release. If archives in all its forms are not only film or music recordings, then certainly old photographs, which in many cases can be probably dated, can also be counted as archives.
Yeah.
Have you checked whether there are any photographs of the predecessors crews that became Black Noise, which is Pop Glide crew in 1982?
Okay.
And later POC. Before POC there was Ballistic Rockers, perhaps later than 84. If you could get photos of those crews with very verifiable dates, I'm sure a call to Emil YX will help. Could that not be the first archive accounts of hip-hop elements being practiced by South Africans?
Yeah. Definitely not against anything he said, because the brother is clearly calling us on the decision to use archiving as a tool to begin the hip-hop story.
Yes.
And the question is, if we used, remember, on the episode, we used Sipho Kumeda's track as a reference point to the beginning of the South African hip-hop story, justifying it by saying that that is the oldest living archives that shows us of people practicing the art and disseminating out there for others to know. Right now, in that same stream of thought and rationale, he asked the question, wouldn't that mean that hip-hop began with the recorded songs of Curtis Blow and such and such? No, because there are older archives than that. One of the oldest and probably most important living archive of hip-hop history is Kool Herc's actual block party flyer.
Yes.
Which shows us the address, which shows us the date, which shows us the time. It literally places us in that place and in that moment, and is itself a testament of the activity that was going on, and is the oldest living artifact to show us the origins of hip-hop. Now, if we had something similar, if we had, and holler at us, because this is an ever-going, ever-building story. In our pursuit, and when I say our, I mean, Takeza and I's pursuit of creating this South African hip-hop story, because the episode was about not only you and I, but the collective people as South African hip-hop fans coming together and making this story up as we go along by finding out what is the oldest remnant we can find that speaks for how old hip-hop in this land is.
Yeah.
And so far, our reference point was Jika. Jika was important in that sense. It's a sign of rap, which by virtue makes it a sign of somebody being influenced and practicing an aspect of hip-hop. Now I'm saying, if we have flyers that are older than that, right?
Yes.
If we have any kind of visual that is older than that, that can definitely usurp Sipho Kumeda's joint. But up until we get
such
kind of evidence in our research of bringing the hip hop story together, Giga is the best we have. Giga is our reference point to hip hop being practiced, because like we said in the episode, obviously there are people who were influenced by hip hop before the song was made.
Yes.
But what the song represents is a symbolic moment for all of us to date how old that we're talking when we talk about the roots of the influence of hip hop in this country.
Yeah, and what's your take on the, because we're talking about now recordings and actual visual.
Yes.
And he's making an argument. What about photos? You know, photographs that you know.
You see, the difference between a photograph and a recorded song is that a photograph is often created for the purposes of private use. Photographs often end up in photo albums as memoirs that people contain and cherish for themselves. Now, if you take a song, it's done for the opposite.
Yeah, it's done for everyone.
It comes from a personal motivation and inspiration, obviously.
Yes.
But it's made for the purposes of bringing something out there to the masses.
To consume.
Right, to the masses, to the people. Now, the archiving aspect in the hip-hop story is about public consumption. It's about the fact that do we have archives that show us and are able to take us back to a moment that we can actually definitively point out and say, this is what was being done by who, and this is what was practiced at this point in time. So this is where the history and the storytelling comes into play. When people want to use photograph as part of the archiving experience, then they're opening up their photo albums to us. Then there has to come narrative with it. There has to come context, you know. If you give us a photo, we have to know who's in it. We have to know what was being practiced. Then you take us back into that moment. So ultimately what I'm saying is photographs could count as part of the archiving experiences. And this is why we need to get those photographs out there. People need to start telling their stories. If we are going to tell the hip hop story from a holistic perspective, people need to understand that every moment is dating. You know, every moment is sisa to a particular point in time. And so dropping the photo needs to come with some context. Dropping a video needs to come with some context. Because the thing with music is that it usually speaks for itself, and it usually comes with the context packaged within it. So we know who the artist is. We know, you know, the song itself is information. But photos and videos don't inherently carry the information. Sometimes you need to put context to those things.
Okay.
Right. So to my brother Fifth Element, if you have evidence, you know, and archives that predate the moment that we put as our symbolic beginning, then holler at us. Because again, what we are doing or attempting to do with the episode, and we will keep moving with it.
We'll keep moving,
is piece together all of these lost fragments of hip hop as it happened in South Africa. And he mentioned some crucial names. He mentioned Black Noise, he mentioned Emil. And so the argument from our perspective was, as far as we know, none of those movements produced any public archiving right? Which can show us and definitively point out that this was an activity happening at that time which predates the song we performed.
Okay.
What do you got to say, Lekes?
Nah, I'm with you on that one.
Okay.
I'm with you because we had a conversation during that video where you were telling me about, you know, there's a we were making an example about if me and you were, you know, b-boys, and if I was a b-boy and then people only knew me about word of mouth, and you had someone recording, so that that would mean my own history would be lost in time.
Exactly.
Even though yours would be documented. So
Yeah.
that's archiving.
See, that's why I just the last point on this.
Yes.
As Africans, we know very well the disadvantages of oral history, right?
Yes.
If something is passed down through the personal transference of an individual, it can easily get lost.
Yeah. Inglo ufakelele yakhe.
Ufakelele yakhe.
Yeah.
So archiving helps in the sense that it makes the story unified and gives a version for all people to understand and transmit, right? So in our telling of the hip-hop story, it's gonna be very important that we move beyond personal anecdotal experiences and find archives that speak beyond you as an individual, that actually document the moment, so you don't have to speak for it, but the moment itself speaks for itself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then we can start going into the business of history, because history speaks for itself. When you start and try to speak on behalf of history, obviously what you're going to now say is your own personal perspective. And like I said, what we are attempting to do is create a South African hip-hop history. And that was our origin story thus far.
Yeah.
And if our subscribers want to challenge us on that, we actually want that.
Okay.
Holla at us.
Remark is about actually now Sipho Gumede, and then he's trying to debunk this whole Sipho Gumede.
Yeah.
So he's saying, last remark, just on the side. And guys, I ain't here to pick a fight, ne? Cause you almost asked for comments.
Yes, sir.
Respect to Sipho Gumede. I have at least 2 CD albums in my collection. I need to do a stock take. But does practicing one element of a culture in isolation from that culture with no intention of being associated with that culture and not actively being involved in further expanding it make one proponent of that culture, especially if you only ever did it once? If I were to have back in 1980s cooked the first pot of genuine West African jollof in a restaurant before there were any Nigerians in Cape Town, and a Cape Town food magazine wrote about it, so it's most archived, ne?
Yeah.
Can you really say that I, who have no connection with Nigeria, have studied the Nigerian culture in Cape Town, or and has many 1980s pot of jollof in any way influenced the way that West Africans who now live in Cape Town practice their culture? Has my pot of jollof laid some sort of foundation for West African cooking and by extension West African culture?
Let's run with that jollof analogy. I love it. I love it so much. If you sincerely were the first South African who cooked or opened up,
He said a West African
a West African restaurant
in Cape Town. Yeah.
You would definitely have a great impact in introducing an aspect of the Nigerian culture to South Africans, right?
We're on the same page.
Exactly. So to relay that analogy back
to Sipho
Gumede and the song Chika, Sipho Gumede's use of rap as an art form, his use of Grandmaster Flash's sample, and his decision to, as a South African at that time, take part in what was pretty much still an Afro-American art form, was culturally important because it indicates a shift. It's a door opening, saying that hip-hop was beginning to channel itself into the South African experience. Just like the jollof and the Nigerian culture, by virtue of you just giving somebody a taste, would begin to channel itself into that space, because you cook jollof for one person, they like it, somebody wants to know how to make it for themselves, they learn how to make it, and then before you know it, they discover aspects of the jollof that maybe you hadn't, and aspects of Nigerian culture, and then maybe they start going into the clothing, and maybe they start going into the language. That's how culture moves malleably through the ages and seasons. It is because of, I'm going to use a very controversial term, appropriation. So Sipho Gumede's appropriation of rap is important to the foundations of South African hip-hop, because rap is an aspect of the hip-hop culture. So you can't take an aspect of rap without acknowledging the fact that you are taking hip-hop and you are taking an element of the hip hop DNA. So what we're saying by putting Uchika as the primary source and the beginning is that was a public expression of an aspect of hip hop important enough to start the pattern of influence, to be able to grow, to be able to kind of nurture this burgeoning seed of influence. Because if somebody like Sipho Kumede is doing it, if somebody like Senyaka is doing it,
yes.
if Kwaito artists are able to take and implement aspects of hip hop culture, then as a whole it expands the influence of hip hop beyond the Afro-American experience. So that's what I think heads need to understand is hip hop might have elements, but you take any of those elements and the rest sort of travel with it.
Yeah.
You can't take one and divorce the others, because what will end up happening is, if intention is a very important aspect of it, Sipho Kumede from the artistic perspective took hip hop because it obviously inspired
him, yeah.
And it inspired him enough for him to appropriate it and interpret it in his own way. I mean, for goodness sake, the man was rapping in isiZulu. So that's what is important there, is that it shows somebody being genuinely inspired by an art form and attempting to authenticate it into his locale by doing it in a way that is more indigenous. So when the intention behind the appropriation is to truly naturalize an element and take an aspect of something that might be considered foreign and find a way to make it yours, then it transcends even where you took it from. So to kind of answer it simply, yes, your analogy does apply. If you take jollof and you cook, you were the first jollof cook in Cape Town, then you are the first element of Nigerian culture in Cape Town, even if you are not a Nigerian.
Yeah. So yeah, shout out to Fifth Element. Yeah, Fifth Element Life. Yeah, shout out to you, man. Yeah, and on his last, he actually says, "I love what you guys are doing by opening up important topics." So
we love what you are doing by opening up the discussion.
Yeah. I wanted to touch on this comment. Last week we dropped a review on
Mr.
Tabizli. Yeah.
Energy.
Energy.
Yeah. Shout out to Mr.
So Nedi, is it Nedi or Nadi Divine?
Yeah.
Woody, this is a beautiful tape. I can't stop listening to it. And the review is so spot on in so many levels. And then she later says, I do hear your points. I agree with everything you say. But for me, the mellowness of her delivery is actually what keeps me listening to this tape. For me, I'd give it a 7. But then again, I do hear where you're coming from.
Right. I love Nadi's comments because what it does is that, again, it brings up the importance of what criticism is. When I do these reviews, Dakeza, I'm very sensitive of trying to elucidate something that is beyond my opinion. Obviously, these are my opinions.
Yes.
But the first thing I take into consideration is artistic vision. So I try and research and go into what the artist is about, what they're trying to achieve, and what their style is. Because when you understand what somebody is trying to achieve, I feel only then can you truly criticize their growth into that. So looking at what Ntabi is attempting to achieve, she's a lyricist, and lyricism is about projecting. Lyricism is about clarity. Lyricism is about your voice resonating in the best possible way. So I really felt like on the issue of her voice feeling muffled into the beats, it compromises into something she is openly trying to do. She's openly trying to communicate with the listener. She's openly trying to create a dialogue. Ntabi doesn't make music where you can dance to. Not readily. This is not what she's trying to access. She is really going into more of an intimate emotional experience, and she's always been that kind of an MC. Shout out for consistency. And in that consistency is what I was critiquing. I was critiquing her growth as a rapper from the standpoint of voice projection, because even after all of this time, there are songs where she really does kind of drown into the beat instead of projecting out of it. And I would think that if what you're trying to do as an artist is speak to me, you'd rather be clearer than the instrumental, than kind of sink beneath it. And so I acknowledge Nady for like kind of teetering between acknowledging kind of the point of view that I'm coming from, that acknowledging Tabby's mode and Tabby's kind of technique, while still expressing her own personal, opinions of how it hits her. And ultimately, this is what I love. I love getting the feedback from people, because also if more and more people are able to kind of confront me about certain aspects, then I'm also able to reconsider whether or not it even matters. Is Ntabi's lack of projection and it compromising the clarity of her instrumentals something that ultimately her fans really care about, And so when I do a review like that, I'm speaking to two demographics, and that's what you'll notice about these reviews, is that I'm speaking to the people who will be fans of the artist, but and
also those who are gonna be discovering,
to discovering. So I think from perspective of the fans, definitely most fans won't have an issue. But from the perspective of somebody who wants to know what this artist is about, it is safer for me to introduce them to what I feel are the strong points and some of the weak points of the artist, so that they can discover that for themselves and find out if it really is a big deal for them.
Okay.
Yeah. Shout out to Nady. Appreciate it.
And so that was our first episode of a dialogue, more responding to comments. And shout out to the guys there are also guys who comment and say big up to what we do, or Ilskundla, Intergalactic. Shout outs to him. So we see you guys. We see you.
We definitely do.
So the importance of this dialogue.
The importance of the dialogue is that we are not speaking in a vacuum. We create content for you. The Headspace was created out of a need to attend and cultivate the South African hip-hop culture in all of its facets. And so far we've been getting massive great responses, indicating to us that the work we are doing really does matter. Because if we were doing this and nobody was really responding and coming back to us, then we wouldn't have a sense of understanding our impact and our effect. So the dialogue truly is something that allows and influences where we go to next. So the things you say to us definitely inspire where we go. We're going in this together. Me and Takeza and I are catalysts in this Headspace movement, but you are definitely the drivers. So we want to hear more of what you want to know, what you don't agree with, what you do agree with, what you're happy with, what you're not happy with, because ultimately Headspace sienza song.
So also future episodes are also dependent on them. You can say in the comment section, so what do you guys think? You'll do an episode on what and so on. So and don't forget to tell your friends, the guys who are talking to us. Tell your friends who you know will enjoy this content to come and subscribe. Algorithms.
Lastly on this, the power of the internet is that we are able to transcend intimacy, into something that connects us on a almost spiritual level. And the beautiful thing about the Headspace is that every time you and I sit on this couch and talk about the shit that we love talking about, we really do feel the energy of all of you around us, talking with us. So let's keep on continuing these conversations and changing the game.
From Ikake Ninzi.
Nekaka ninzi kakulu.
Peace.
Peace out.